The grand townhouse at 14 Østergaard glowed with candlelight that spilled onto the snowy Copenhagen street. Inside, Councillor Olsen's winter soiree was in full splendor. 43 guests milled about the Greek-themed drawing room, where a string quartet played near potted ferns. The air smelled of beeswax, roast pheasant, and the faintest hint of the herring salad that had caused such a scandal when it toppled onto Mrs. Hertz's silk gown earlier. At the center of attention stood Councillor Elias Knapp, his gold watch chain straining against his ample waistcoat. "The modern age," he boomed, waving a glass of punch. "Bah! In King Hans's time, men knew their place. There was order. There was—" "Bubonic plague," interjected young Dr. Müller, adjusting his spectacles. "Cultural refinement." The councillor's mutton chops quivered. Why, in 1495? Meanwhile, in the cloakroom 2 floors below, events were transpiring that would alter several lives that evening. The small space, lined with pegs holding beavy hats and wool coats, smelled of camphor and wet spaniel, courtesy of the Olsen's dog, Balthazar. 2 figures sat on the oaken bench, one a radiant creature whose dress shimmered like morning dew, the other a severe woman in grey whose form seemed to absorb the candlelight. "You're too generous with mortals," said Care, her voice like a rusty hinge. "Remember the cobbler last week?" Fortune's assistant twirled a galosh on her finger. "But tonight will be different. For my birthday, I may grant one human their heart's desire through these." She held up ordinary-looking black galoshes, except for the faint golden stitching that seemed to shift when unobserved. Care snorted. "Desire granted is misery earned." That cobbler wished to understand animals and learned his prize hound thought him a fool. With a pop like a champagne cork, both vanished, leaving the enchanted footwear beside a pair of nearly identical galoshes belonging to, though he didn't know it yet, Councillor Knapp. The party ended near midnight. The councillor, flushed with punch and medieval fervor, donned the magic galoshes by mistake. Stepping onto Østergaard, he sank ankle-deep, not in snow, but in foul-smelling muck. The gas lamps were gone. In their place, a single oil lamp flickered before a shrine to the Virgin Mary, illuminating a street of crooked, half-timbered houses that leaned like drunken sailors. "Disgraceful," he sputtered, then froze as 2 men approached, one carrying a lute, missing 3 strings. "Good even, sirrah," the lutenist slurred. "Hast thou a penny for a song of Troy?" The councillor's stomach lurched. That wasn't a costume. The man's woolen hose were crusted with authentic medieval grime. A sudden fanfare announced torchbearers escorting a bishop on a white mule. "Make way for His Excellency, Bishop Jens of Zealand," cried a page. "But Bishop Pedersen died in 1872, the councillor whispered. His knees buckled as he realized he'd been transported to the very era he'd romanticized. Over the next hour, the councillor stumbled through streets that reeked of chamber pots emptied from upper windows. Failed to convince a tavern keeper he wasn't a mad foreigner. Terrified scholars by describing future inventions as like steam engines. Nearly got trampled by an actual swineherd driving his charges to market. When he finally collapsed in terror, he awoke back in his own time, the goloshes having fallen off. His fashionable frock coat was ruined, but his worldview was shattered in more profound ways. The night watchman, finding the discarded goloshes, slipped them on. If only I were that carefree lieutenant upstairs, he sighed, and instantly became the man, standing in a well-appointed room, holding a love poem. But the lieutenant's life, full of romantic woes and debts, proved less enviable than imagined. After wishing himself back, the watchman then gazed at the moon and wished to visit it. In a blink, his soul soared past stars to lunar cities of crystalline spires, where translucent moon-dwellers debated whether Earth could sustain life. Far too dense, one sniffed. Meanwhile, his body sat motionless on the steps until hospital orderlies took him for dead. Only when they removed the goloshes did his soul return, with tales that made his wife cross herself and fetch the priest. At the police station, a clerk took the goloshes for his own. Wishing to be a poet, he suddenly composed brilliant verses, until he envied birds their freedom and transformed into a lark. Flying through Fredericksburg Gardens, he was captured by schoolboys, nearly eaten by their cat, and only escaped by wishing himself human again, though he still absent-mindedly pecked at his breakfast rolls the next morning. A theology student borrowed the goloshes to walk in the garden. Wishing to travel, he endured a cramped stagecoach through Switzerland, where his boots pinched terribly, an Italian inn swarming with fleas and beggars crying "Miserabili," a meal of rancid oil salad, and what he hoped wasn't really roasted rooster crests. Exhausted, he whispered, "I wish for perfect peace," and found himself in a coffin, his spirit freed. The fairies reappeared as Care removed the goloshes. "See," she chided, "mortals always wish for the wrong things." The magic footwear vanished that night, though some say they reappear whenever someone sighs. If only, on cold Copenhagen evenings, you might still see Councillor Knapp studying history books with new humility, or the watchman gazing at the moon with wonder instead of weariness. As for the student, he became a renowned philosopher, though he could never explain why he always kept a pair of ordinary goloshes by his door, just in case. The end.